Okay, it's gone 8 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Good evening, everyone. So I think that it's fair to say that when we put this series together, we were thinking, what are the topics that are relevant to people? What are the areas of money management that are relevant to people's lives? One of the hottest topics was obviously, the whole area of making weddings, and it's an area that by and large seems to get a lot of people talking, whichever way people choose to celebrate the occasion. But ultimately, whilst the time is one that should be a source of nachas, it should be a really special time. Very often, or sometimes, it can be a topic that's a cause for concern for others, and occasionally seems to throw up a little bit of controversy to the mix as well. Now, COVID notwithstanding, although I think plenty of people are quite pleased to see what weddings have become over recent months, and kind of maybe some people even wishing that this is how we could celebrate weddings going forward. Whether or not that will happen, that's a matter of conjecture. But for this evening's presentation, I'm delighted to welcome two very special people to present for us tonight. First is Danny Woolick, who's an experienced Masilah coach and educator, and an experienced activist as well. And I'm also pleased to welcome Moshe Davis, who's reached the incredible milestone of having organized 3,000 weddings. So between the two of them, the aim of tonight's session is to equip people with the tools and knowledge to make a beautiful but cost-effective wedding. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Danny to take the floor. Danny.
Thank you, Benji, and thank you everybody for joining tonight. It's quite nice that the timing for this webinar takes place just after Parshas Chayei Sarah, where we read about Eliezer, who was sent by Avram to find a suitable wife for his son Yitzchak. I'm not suggesting that Eliezer's approach to identifying a wife for Yitzchak will work for everybody in today's day and age, but as I will come to in a few minutes, his no-nonsense attitude in sitting down with Bethuel and Lavan definitely paid dividends in the longer term. Before we delve into the subject matter, I'd just like to start by saying a couple of words about Masilah and what we do. Masilah works with people, couples, families, and students, and its aim is to achieve long-term sustainable financial well-being. Much of our family coaching is targeted at short to medium-term issues, such as not having enough income each month to meet a family's outgoings, or as we like to say, the money runs out before the month does. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, and bat mitzvahs are as significant when it comes to financial planning. Whilst the timing for a bar and bat mitzvah is predictable, a prudent and responsible approach to wedding planning will always pay dividends. However old your children are, it's never too late to start planning a wedding, or several weddings one day, please God. Equally, it's never too late to start planning and saving for that special day. The more you can save, the more you will have to spend when the time comes. The title of this webinar is the A to Z of making a beautiful and cost-effective wedding. And many of you watching and listening will be wondering what it can cost to make a wedding that is both beautiful and cost-effective. And to help you give some real-life context, we're delighted to have Moshe with us today, who will be able to give us some guidance from his over quarter of a century wedding planning and event management. That's a lot of weddings, and as Benji said, I think it's 3,000 weddings, Kanai Nahara. Of course, you'll also hear people tell you that a long and happy marriage is far more important than the wedding that kicks it off. But at least some of what your marriage or your children's marriage will be like, and the tone it takes can be influenced by how you go about making that wedding. Similarly, people will tell you your chosn and kala that a wedding is just a few hours, it's a day at most. But in actual fact, it's more than that. Of course, every Baal Simcha wants to make a beautiful wedding, but throwing all your money and plenty more which you may not have at a wedding to make it the most lavish affair since the latest royal wedding isn't necessarily going to lead into a beautiful marriage. A wedding which leads to indebtedness, stress, anxiety, and arguments will probably not get the marriage off to the best start. There's also, though, the subliminal message that spending maturely on a wedding sends to the new couple. The more responsibly you behave towards money, the better relationship that they will have towards their own finances, as and when they come to be self-sustaining. And as we parents and parents-in-law say, Bimheira B'Yameinu. So there are many things that you can spend your money on. And you will no doubt appreciate this if you had a go at the wedding challenge that Benji emailed out a couple of days ago. What you need to do is to decide on your set of priorities. Not only will that influence how you choose to define your simcha, but it'll also have a profound impact on the sort of chosn and kala your children are and you want your children to be. Will they and you use the money available to add value, or will it be frittered away on short-term pleasures? However, a word of caution. The Masilah approach is non-judgmental. What I choose to spend my money on may be completely different to what you choose to spend your money on, and I have to respect your choices. As long as you realize that if you spend more on X, you'll have less available to spend on Y, that's your choice. And this applies equally in your month-to-month budgeting that we are engaged with families in Masilah all the time, but equally in your simcha planning. As long as you realize if you spend more on this, you'll have less available to spend on that, that's entirely your prerogative. Wedding planning in reality comprises two parts. There's the long-term and the short-term aspects. Long-term financial planning is to make sure that you've thought ahead to these happy life cycle events. Short-term planning, which deals with the more practical elements of wedding preparations, we'll come to a little bit later. Long-term planning considerations are obvious, but nevertheless, they bear repeating. And this is it. Think ahead, create a Thank you for muting me. I'll now unmute myself. But for the avoidance of doubt, what I did say was think ahead and create a saving plan. I've been involved with many families who choose to ignore or simply overlook the relatively predictable costs which making any simcha entails. Moshe will enlighten us on what those numbers could be, but suffice it to say that making a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, or a wedding, whatever the simcha might be, it will involve substantial expenditure above and beyond your regular outgoings, and you need to make sure that you have done whatever you can to prepare financially for those events. For this reason, it's common sense, but it's prudent to always keep in mind what we learn in the Gemara Tamid, which is simply this: Ezehu chacham haroeh es hanolad. Who is the wise person? Someone who can see what's coming over the mountain, coming over the horizon. These things are foreseeable, so be a chacham. When you're preparing your monthly budget, put something away each month towards these one-off expenses, even if they seem far, far away at the moment. It will be much easier to save a little bit each month for several years than to raise what you need to fund a wedding at relatively short notice. Your saving plan can be formal or it can be informal. Either way, it should form part of your monthly expenditure, and you should put it aside and effectively lock it up somewhere ring-fenced, where it won't be raided or dipped into until the simcha comes along. However many children you're blessed to have, make a saving pot for each child's wedding. And if you haven't done this until now, start tomorrow. Put away the child benefit if you can afford to do so. Whatever you can save between now and the big day, whether that's a little or a lot, it'll mean you've got more available to give the chosn and kala the best start in life when the time comes. And that doesn't necessarily mean you'll make the world's biggest wedding, but you will have the funds available to spend as you choose when the time comes. Let's move the clock forward a few years to the point where matchmakers or shadchanim or friends and family start making inquiries about your son and daughter with a specific suggestion in mind. The contemplation of marrying off a child and everything which that entails suddenly becomes very real. Believe me, it's a nerve-wracking time and one which requires you to keep a level head. Before you even delve into wedding expenses though, sit down, have a think. What's going to happen after the wedding? Are the young couple going to be self-sufficient? And if not, what provisions need to be made for supporting them after the wedding? What is the long-term plan? Are they going to be able to live somewhere rent-free? Are you going to be able to provide for their ongoing sustenance post-Sheva Brachos? These considerations are just as important, if not more so, than the day of the wedding itself. So as you can see, having a child get married isn't only about the wedding. There's the bigger picture to consider as well. And when it comes to the planning of the wedding itself, remember, it's not the flowers, the whiskey bar, or even the size of the band which makes a wedding memorable. It's the guests who create the atmosphere. That will be remembered way after the food has been polished off, the chair covers removed, and the benches shoved into a dining room drawer beneath 200 similar benches, all purloined from other unmemorable simchas. And it's important not to lose sight of this. To make sure the parents of Chosn and Kala also enjoy the simcha, here are some practical suggestions for them. Before any engagement is announced, sit down with the parents on the other side, if you can call them that, the mechatonim, and discuss finances. Some say, and I've spoken to people who've said this, that it should take place before the couple even go out on their first date. At whatever point you choose to do this, and when it's practical to do so, don't make assumptions and do not have inflated expectations. For example, and I've seen this, just because someone made a lavish wedding in the past, and that doesn't have to be a long time ago, it could be 12 months ago or 2 years ago, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can or will want to make a similar wedding now. Another point, visuals can be deceptive. A large house and a fancy car doesn't necessarily imply there's spare cash available, either to make a big wedding or to support a young couple indefinitely. Masilla's Klein book is full of examples of families who regrettably live far beyond their means, merely to give the appearance of keeping up with the Joneses, or more likely the Cohens. Do your best not to have any preconceived ideas. You've got no idea what another family can afford. You've got no idea what they've got available to spend, or indeed what they want to spend. And this relates to the wedding finances and post-wedding finances. Even with the best shadchanim in the world, messages get lost in translation, and don't rely on assumptions. Not theirs, not yours, not somebody you know, not somebody mentioned something in short. Another common misconception is that there are rules and norms which have to be followed or complied with. Well, the only rule I'm aware of is that there are no rules. Maybe 50 years ago, it was traditional for the girl's side to pay for the wedding and the chosn side to pay for housing or to ensure they've got a home to live in. But to the best of my knowledge, that's not the case anymore. And therefore, these things have to be discussed in an open and frank manner. Start with a blank piece of paper. People often wonder if it's right to involve the chosn and kala in these discussions. And I would say, well, the answer's up to you. It's up to each family. But whatever you choose to do, my advice is don't try and extract leverage by asking your son and daughter to put pressure on their future partner, who should in turn persuade their parents to come round to your line of thinking. An engagement can be a tense time for all concerned, and there's just no need to ramp up the pressure by coercive tactics. So when you sit down with your future mechatonim, be prepared, know your budget. What are you willing to spend on the wedding? And as I've said, as importantly, have a clear idea of what you can afford to put towards future living expenses. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a position like that, also know how much you have to put towards a deposit on a home, if that's within your affordability range. But don't be afraid of discussing money. Believe me, it's much easier to start up your relationship with your mechatonim in an open and frank way, rather than kicking the can down the road and avoiding that conversation. You'll have to grasp the nettle at some point, and it will be easiest if you do it up front. I appreciate this can often be a difficult thing to do. In some cases, these will be people that you have never met before, but who you desperately want to get on with because you don't want to spoil the shidduch for the sake of your son and daughter. In other cases, they may be people who are well known to you, people who live just a few doors away or daven in the same shul. But in this case too, it's unlikely that you've ever discussed money matters with them in detail. And this too could lead to potential awkwardness. But remember, they will be in exactly the same position as you are, and they'll have the same concerns and the same reservations. If you take the lead with a positive attitude and a clear frame of mind, you'll be much happier about the process. Sit down and talk to them. In this country, nobody is comfortable talking about money. If you go to Israel, it's different. They can all tell you what you've got and you'll tell them what they've got. But here, no one's comfortable talking about these things. But it's just one of those things you've got to do, and you might as well do it early. Plan for these three key areas. You've got the wedding, you've got future support, and then you've got the housing. It's not to say everyone's going to be able to look at all these three or can afford to look at all these three, but at least cover off the first two. The wedding and ongoing support. Your objective should be that by the end of that first or second conversation, each family knows where they stand and they should be able to moderate their expectations, your expectations, and your children's expectations accordingly. Let's focus on the wedding itself. Once you've discussed and decided how much you have to spend on the big day, you need to decide on your set of priorities. As you will have seen from the handouts, the supplementary material which Benji emailed on Thursday, within a finite budget, people have to make choices. And I'm sure Moshe will be able to give us examples of weddings which he has been involved in, which have had an unlimited budget. But for most people, that's not the case, and they will be on a limited budget. And in order to live within that budget, choices must be made. For some, the band will be most important, and for others, it will be the caterer. For one family, it could be the venue, and for another one, it might be having their entire circle of friends and all the Chosn and Kala circle of friends celebrating with them on the night. But with all these considerations, we come back to the key message, which is to try and focus on what is going to be important for this simcha and for the Chosn and Kala. Now, I'll digress just for a minute to say something that I heard just a few days ago. And it's this: in the fifth Sheva Brachas, we say, Sameach to Samach Reim Ahuvim, Kisasamechacho Yetzircho Began Eden Mikedem, which basically translates to mean they should rejoice. This is the Chosn and Kala, bride and groom, beloved friends, like you are happy in Gan Eden as Adam Harishon was. Baruch Atah Hashem, Mesameach Chosn v'Kala. And Rashi contrasts the difference between the conclusion of this bracha, which is Mesameach Chosn v'Kala in the fifth bracha, and the sixth bracha, which ends Mesameach Chosn im hakala, with the kala. And he explains why is it that the first bracha is Mesameach Chosn v'Kala. It says because the actual bracha that we're giving them is the bracha they should be happy for the rest of their lives. Just as in the same way and with the same happiness.
Danny, just a second. So whoever's unmuted, if you don't mind just muting yourself, just make sure we don't hear you. Thank you. Sorry, Danny.
That they should be as happy as Adam Harishon was in Gan Eden Mikeden all those days ago. And I heard Rav Melech Biderman pose a question. It should be enough to say, Sameach to Samach Reim Ahuvim. Let them be happy. Why are we comparing them and saying that they should be as happy as Adam Harishon was? In what way was Adam Harishon so happy that he is the benchmark to which they should all aspire? And he answered in the name of Rabbi Yankele Galinsky. He said the secret to lifelong happiness and the happiness of a new bride and groom is be like Adam Harishon. What does that mean? Adam Harishon was completely alone with Chava. There was no one else in the world. There was no one else to look at. There was no one else who would look at them. There was nobody who they could be jealous of and nobody who they could make jealous. They didn't have neighbors to think, what would the neighbors say or what did the neighbors do? The message is simple. If we don't look over our shoulder, we'll be happy. It's a good recipe for life. So getting back to our wedding plans, you decide on what's important to you, but make sure it's manageable within your budget. And to do that, you need some idea of what these things are likely to cost. And this is where I'd like to bring in Moshe. Moshe has been involved, as we've heard, in 3,000 weddings over many, many years, over a quarter of a century. And were it not for lockdown, I'm sure he'd be involved with many more weddings besides. And we're all hoping that that comes to an end pretty quickly. But before bringing in Moshe, please do remember, in addition to the wedding and the post-wedding expenses that I've mentioned, there are also costs which you need to think about and budget for. And these could potentially involve an engagement party, a l'chaim, an ofruf, sheva brachos, clothes, shaykel, gifts for the chosen, gifts for the kala, gifts for the chatonim, gifts for the shadchan, money for paying people to come to the wedding, whether it be the officiants, bridesmaids' dresses, transport, accommodation. The list goes on and on and on and on. But I'm not trying to terrify you. We could be here all night. So let's focus on some of the more obvious wedding day headings. Moshe, you're unmute? No, you're unmuted. Wonderful. You've organized all these weddings, Moshe. What would you say are the most important things that you need to know at the outset when planning a wedding?
As you said quite rightly before, the budget is the number one. An idea of where we're standing, what you've got. Once you've got an idea, then we structure around your finance side on it. Meaning to say, if someone's got £20,000 or someone's got £40,000 or someone's got, as you said, £250,000, that is the basic structure. So a person has to have an idea of numbers, of how much he's got to spend. And if he hasn't got an idea, then obviously the question would be is, how many people do you want to do a wedding for? Do you want to do a wedding for 200 people? Do you want to do a wedding for however many people your budget can take you for?
Excellent. And I'm guessing that the numbers and the venue would have a profound impact on the overall cost. Maybe if I could ask you first about venues, can you give us an idea what a venue might cost to hire for a wedding?
You're starting from around about £3,000 going on to £25,000. You can, the sky's the limit. But on average, you're looking at around about £3,000.
And would that cost more if I chose to have my chuppah in one place and a reception in another place, or that's a good rule of thumb, £3,000, however many venues you need?
Starting price is £3,000. So you can go to the chuppah, which will cost you around about £3,000, and then you can move on to another hall, which will cost you around about £4,000 to £4,000, depending on the size of dinner people you're going to have.
So the more venues, the more the cost, I guess.
Absolutely.
So I guess if people are looking to save money, there would be some sense in having everything within
amalgamated, chuppah, and then dinner follow on, or what we call a break in between, and then going on to the dinner a few hours later, or concentrate.
With such a range of prices for halls, are you able to get the hall to give you stuff for free? I mean, could you get decorations? Are they included? Would they be chucked in?
Some halls have it in already, and you don't have to. It's a question of asking them, what do you provide? So when I go in as a party planner, I ask questions like, do you have a cloakroom? What size tables do you have? Do you have enough staging? Do you have a backdrop? Do you have mechitzas? All these sort of questions, which a client not necessarily would know the answer to. And that's why, I mean, I'm not promoting myself, but an events planner is normally very important to have for that reason, because there are questions which a Baal Simcha would not have an answer to, or wouldn't ask the questions because they've got no idea what sort of questions, and especially if you're a first timer, do mechitzas come with it? Do lighting come with it? Do you have a backdrop? Do you have a bridal chair? It's all these questions which is important as an outsider.
I guess that comes with experience, and that's why it's useful to have you here. So, I appreciate the sky's the limit, but if we were just to sort of rein things back a little bit and from my mind, start things chronologically, so to speak. So, if for example, I'm thinking about sending out the invitations. How much does it typically cost to make an invitation?
Invitations could cost you starting from £150 upwards, depending. Are you going to go for Creed? Are you going to go for Boss? Are you going to go for laminating? Are you going for expensive envelopes? Are you going for a monogram? And it's again,
it all adds up. But you're saying £150 per invitation. So what's the top sort of figure that you'd have to allow if you wanted to make a fancy invitation?
I've had someone who's spent over £5,000.
Okay. And of course, you've got to allow for stamps. Postage isn't cheap. I was shocked to find the price of a postage stamp the other day.
There are people like Gmachim who do you have to put them in street order, and then they go out every week, and they got people in their streets who deliver it into people's houses. So that's a saving again of knowing who to go to and who, you know, a lot of it is asking and finding out where you can get, or who does what we call posting the invitations. Is there a candle gemach? Is there dresses gemach? And all these sorts of things.
Good tip. Good tip. Get your invitations delivered by the local gemach and save yourself a fair bit of money.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if before very long we end up with a virtual invitation, or just a PDF that gets sent out by WhatsApp. You can eliminate that completely and save the environment as well. Well, you mentioned mechitzas and chuppahs beforehand. What are the options for a chuppah? Have you got anything that can be saved there?
Well, my favorite is, it's a personal thing of mine, but I always like the idea of the 4 poles, and either using the chossen's talus, which again, he's going to wear every single day, and they say, this is the talus that I've used, which doesn't cost anything. Or you can spend on chuppahs £300, £1,000, £1,500. Again, sky's the limit of how much you want to decorate it. But I love the most traditional, which is the olden times sake, which are the 4 poles, which gives again the cover to 4 people to hold it. And as well, the nice idea of using, we had a chasna a few weeks ago where someone didn't have a father, and he said, I want to use my father's talus as the chuppah. Where do I get the poles from? I said, well, hey, presto, I've got them. So how much are they? I said, not everything is money, it's knowledge. Where can I go to get them? Where can I, you know, source all these things from?
That's very meaningful, actually, to have something which has a personal connection with the past.
Absolutely.
I think it's a nice idea, but I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say I've seen that many times. Many chuppahs I've seen have been completely decked out with flowers and all sorts of things, and you know, it makes me think to ask, you know, what sort of budget would one normally need to allow for flowers at a wedding?
Flowers, again, you can start from £20 a table arrangement to £1,000 a table arrangement.
Wow.
Again, it's subject to the expenditure of people, how much they have to spend and what they feel is more important. Some people say photography is more important. Some people say, no, I want the music. Some people say, I've had people saying to me, Moshe, you were more important than anyone else because you got the wedding together and things like that. So everyone's got their little preferences and importance.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it bears out what we said earlier on, which is within a budget, everyone can make choices. As we say in Messina, a budget creates an envelope, and that doesn't mean it has to be restricting or limiting. It means it gives you the freedom within that envelope to decide how you want to apply your budget. If you want to apply it on the flowers, well, you've told us it can be from £20 up to £1,000 a table. If it can be on the chuppah, we know what's going to cost. But I guess one of the things that always springs to mind when talking about weddings is the bride's dress. You know, and I know you mentioned in Gemacht or whatever have you. What are the options when it comes to buying or paying for a bridal dress?
Well, you can pick up from the Gemach, you can pick up for £150, which will include the chairs, the shoes, the veil, the tiara and everything. Or you can go out and start renting from anything up £750 to £3,000, even to £5,000.
For renting a dress?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Wow. Would you always recommend somebody went to the Gemach, or is there a situation where you think that wouldn't be appropriate? Or
no, the Gemach have got some gorgeous, stunning dresses, and they've got a variety to choose from. And I would say my first option would be is always try the Gemachim first, because they are they're very helpful, and they've always given a service. I know typically the Golders Green one is the best for it, and they give their own personal gefühl or feelings to the color and what type of dress do you like and where do you know what would you like, and they've got such a variety. So I always say try the Gemach first, which is the most important.
Excellent.
And that's savings of hundreds of pounds.
Excellent, good tip there. Thank you very much. And I suppose when you say, going to Gemach, what sprung to mind there is in terms of what other things can you do which you don't have to spend money on, but can still look perfectly respectable. I guess hair and makeup is another area where you could potentially make savings if you wouldn't do your own hair or something like that. I suppose it's also possibility. I'm not suggesting you, Moshe, here. I know you've got your limitations, but
Yeah. Hair and makeup, again, is something which the bride has to look good on the actual day, and it's her day, and she really wants to look top of, 10 out of 10. And you can't start penny pinching on, or I'm going to go to a cheaper hairdresser or a cheaper makeup artist, because at the end of the day, they have to look the best, and they want to look the best.
I guess at the end of the day, it's all about priorities.
Priority. I give an example: the benches, which you mentioned before. You're putting 200 in your cupboard there with all the others. I started now with a gemach for benches, which again we took a florist and I asked her, what would you think would be the best border we can do to match all the venues? We made 5,000 of them. I give them free of charge. And over the last 5 years, if I count maybe on one hand the amount of people who've made benches, I'm exaggerating. They've all said to me, Moshe, we'll take your benches free of charge. I.e. the transport as well. One of the things people want to go with nice Rolls Royces or Jaguars or limos and all that sort of thing. Again, so I went and bought myself a nice car, which I incorporate in my fee. And again, 99.9%, even what I call the very wealthy people had turned around and said, Moshe, that's a saving of £400. We'll use your car. There's nothing wrong with it.
Excellent idea. And so always looking for savings, and those seem to be two areas where there are potential for saving money. Let me bounce this one back to you. You spoke about mechitzas, and I went to a wedding in Israel actually last February before last. There was this most elaborate mechitza there, and also some pretty smartly decorated chairs. Would that norm? I mean, I'm guessing you're going to say no. But would the mechitza and the chairs usually be included in the hall hire?
Not necessarily. If you go to the non-Jewish venues, they don't have mechitzas. So you have to bring in, again, it's your choice. Do you want to spend £150 on a mechitza? Do you want to spend 300? Do you want to spend £1,000? Chairs, again, some venues have got some beautiful chairs which do not need covering. And if you do want them covered, they're £1, £1.10 a chair. Or if you want to go for a bit more fancier chair, you're looking at £3 plus. Again, some people turn around to me and say to me, there's nothing wrong with the chairs. And some people say, oh, those chairs are disgusting. So I say, well, you can have chair covers for £1.10. Again, you can, there is a gemach out there. But again, you have to be careful with some of the gemachim, which is very important to say it. A gemach stands for Gemilas Chesed. If they say to you, oh, we need them back folded nicely by the end of the evening and washed and cleaned, that's not what a Baal Simcha really wants on the night of the wedding, coming home and start putting them in a washing machine and drying and folding. And then, oh, would you give us a donation as well? So again, you have to be very careful with gemachs. What is their final budget at the end of their final charge at the end of the day, and what headache you got? Why I did the benches was because people were saying, oh, can we have a donation, please? Can you wipe them down, put them in tens and bring them back the next morning because we need it for the next day? Al Simcha doesn't want to have that headache. So again, it's things like that, which...
So I guess the elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, which we haven't spoken about just yet, is caterers. Because I'm guessing with all the trimmings, probably the wrong word to use here, but with all the extras and the other bits and bobs that makes things beautiful, the focus, the main thing is the meal. And if I asked you, what does it cost to have a caterer? You'll probably tell me it's the same as asking how long is a piece of string, but how much should people budget for a caterer?
A budget of a caterer can start at £27.50 a head. It can go up to £100 a head. Again, it's not necessarily what you are giving, it's as well what type of caterer you're going for. Are you going for a lavish who's going to have the what I call the white glove service, or are you going to go for the food? So
But that
starting
will,
is 27.50 a head.
so that's an excellent place to start. £27.50 a head. And do the caterers bring their own linen and tablecloths and napkins and things like that? Will that be included?
They've got a basic which they supply, right? There is obviously people do want brocade, or they want some other fancier names or other motifs on the tablecloth, which again, you can be paying from £7 up a tablecloth, £3.50 a napkin. Again, but if you go for a basic, which the caterer does provide, and they've got assortment of colors and type of material, it normally is incorporated in the price. Yeah.
That's good to know. It's good to know. I guess you might pay slightly more for a per head, but you might find that other things get included within that. So you've got to actually work out what your overall budget is, rather than just saying, okay, caterers £27.50 a head or £30 a head. So that's helpful. I'm guessing there's also, there's also a supplier for every pocket when it comes to the music. I know that every wedding that I've been to has well, almost every wedding I've been to has had a singer and musicians, and that's often what makes the atmosphere, what creates the ruach. But how much realistically, I mean, how much do I actually think about putting aside if I'm going to have some nice music?
You can start with a singer and a one-piece band. You can end off with about £1,500 to £1,600 for a one-piece band, a keyboard player and a singer. Obviously, you can go up to £3,000 to £5,000 to even £15,000, depending what bands you go to. Which band is it from abroad, or is it here for a 17-piece band? Again, the sky's the limit for music. But starting price, I would say to you, around about £1,500, you can get a keyboard and a singer, and that's the trick.
And then I guess you pay per head. You want to
again, saxophone, trumpet, guitarist, drummers, they all are round about between £250 to £450 extra.
I think I'll take up playing the saxophone. But as things stand, you've got your caterer, you've got your music playing in the background, you've got your lovely linen. I've noticed over recent years that the idea of having a drinks bar on the side has crept in, and I can see you shaking your head. But some people want that, I guess. I don't drink, so I can't empathize with that. But what would you need to set aside if you wanted to do something like that for your guests?
An average wedding, I always say to people, you need 6 bottles of whiskey from the Kabbalah's Panim straight through to the mitzvah tons. Anyone who supplies more than 6 bottles of whiskey, the end of the day, their people end up becoming drunk, or they don't even appreciate what they're drinking, and it's just pour for the sake of it. An average wedding of 300, 200 men, 150 men, 6 bottles of whiskey is ample, because again, people have got work the next day. They've come to the hall. They're not going to drive home if they're over the limits or if they've had too much. The same with the wine on the table. You can get away with £12 a bottle, or you can get away with £100 a bottle. Again, the budget, an average budget for a wedding, I would turn around, is about £500 for wine and whiskey for the whole event.
Mm. And of course, I guess if you wanted to, you could just give the host a bottle of whiskey and he could just walk around giving a look at
6 bottles. So I always say 1 for the Kabbalah's Panim, 2 for the reception, 2 for walking around, and 1 for the mitzvah tons as a backup or something like that. And that's why I get to my 6. Obviously, if you're going to have a wedding of 500 people, you bring 8 bottles in total. But again, how much is people going to have? A little shot or something? They're not going to go over the top. They're not going to drink. And
okay, that's good to hear. I'm just looking at my clock and I can see it's already 2040. So I'll try and condense the last couple of questions maybe together, and that is, this, and it's very relevant to the way we're talking, and that's over the last several months, we've been invited to many simchas to participate via Zoom or live stream. And I'd like to know if you could share with us, what would that cost? What's the sensible budget to get something sent over Zoom or live stream? But also, at the same time, we haven't mentioned a video man or a photographer. Can you just sort of bunch that all together and give us an idea of what sort of money we're talking about?
Photography, you're looking starting at £1,500. That I would think would be the cheapest of the lot. Again, they supply 3 USBs, which for the parents, both sets of parents, cost and color, then they can take it off and do themselves pictures. Or again, if they want them to do the albums, there's a bit more expense to that. Starting price of a photographer is around about £1,500.
And a video man?
Video man is round about the same. You can get it for £1,300. Going to the Zoom, again, depending on how much Zoom you want. Do you want just the chuppah? Do you want the dinner as well? Do you want as well the mitzvah tent? So they've got a package price for what we call all the way through.
Right. And you're finding many clients have decided to opt for that Zoom live stream type added extra?
Yes, especially now, even lockdown, when you say complete lockdown, obviously weddings are not allowed to take place, but if there was weddings of 30 people and the grandparents couldn't come in, or bigger vast family, they did it on Zoom and did chuppah only, or just did the dinner. Depending who felt more important was the situation.
It's the same principle that we've been mentioning several times now. You've got to decide on your priorities. You need to know your budget. You spend your budget based on your priorities. So finally, as we're sort of getting towards the end of our virtual simcha here, you mentioned a mitzvah tanz earlier on. I have to say, it's not something that I've done myself too often, but for those who are that way minded, what's it cost to have a mitzvah tanz?
Oh gosh, but remember, it doesn't stop just by the badchen, because you have to pay overtime for the photographer, overtime for the videographer, you have to pay overtime for the hall. And that could end up to cost over the region of £1,500 just to have a mitzvah tanz. Obviously, if you can get it in the budget of the timing of an average photographer, a videographer, musician who's till 12 o'clock, right, then you saved yourself a vast amount of money, which then brings the evening much earlier, start earlier.
Understood. And as the guests are departing, and we wave off the chosn and color, I guess, accommodation is something which springs to mind.
Okay, so funny you've asked that question. I had a lot of issues with color teachers and chosn rebbes, as we call it, chosn teachers, and I insisted that it's important for them to go to a hotel the first night. You can be looking at spending £150 on the night. Are you saying to me, well, that's an expense which is not needed? I personally think it is needed because it breaks the ice. It's a different environment for the young couple when they get back, and it changes the scenery. And I think that is an important point. And all the color teachers, stroke rubbers, have all agreed to say that is a very important thing for the young couple to ease themselves.
I do. It's a good idea, and I think, in conclusion, because I'd like to wrap up, I think I'd make a couple of points. The first one is know your budget, make your priorities. Moshe's given us a very, very detailed explanation and account of what things cost, and hopefully people will remember, some of the headings so they can plan. Think what it is going to be, and then just plan over the years to come till your children's wedding. But this isn't, and I think this is probably a health warning which we should put out, and that is that whilst you could go out and procure each of these services yourself, there are some communal packages available which are run by the Aguda called Simchas Nisuin, and there's a plan run by Bells, which is called Yismach Moshe, which effectively, I think I'm right, caps the whole cost of the wedding at a certain figure, whatever it is. Doesn't matter what it is today. But it means that you don't have to be subject to the vagaries of price movements or money sort of running away with you. So it's something that everyone should be aware of. And I know that you've had some experience dealing with these organizations and could be a good conduit into them, but they are available to everybody within the community. And as far as I understand, you can avail yourself of that package provided you select from a fixed range of suppliers. So they may have 3 florists and 3 caterers and 3 halls or something like that. But that at least means that you don't have to worry about spending a fortune. I'm not saying it's an insignificant amount of money, but nevertheless, it means that you can control your costs and you can ensure that you can give a Bukovic a nice and a very enjoyable experience for the wedding, for the Chosn and Kala, and for the guests, without being in a situation where you've got to go and effectively buy everything retail. You can go by going through Simchas Nisuin and Yismach Moshe, you can buy wholesale and get the benefit of those savings.
Which
I think you'd endorse that.
and you can have it could cost you anything from £10,000 up. So for instance, if I'm looking at the price bracket of Yismach Moshe, for instance, you've got £12,080 for 200 people, which is 100 couples. Obviously, then you have to add on the hair, the makeup, and the dress and whatever. But you can get away with a wedding for £15,000 all in.
And that will be in a nice hall with a nice caterer.
Absolutely.
And it's a very respectable thing to do. So I think what we're both saying here is there are ways you can approach this, which will both limit your costs and cap your costs so that you can get the benefit of these savings available.
Yeah.
Excellent. Moshe, that's great. Thank you very, very much. I think the key messages which you've managed to get across have been: have a good idea of what things are going to cost. That's going to be your starting point for your planning. Work on your priorities, estimate the rough cost of what it could be. Put something aside each month from as early as you possibly can. And if you do, then when it comes to the big day, you can enjoy the simcha, your children's simcha, as much as they're enjoying it. And please God, that will leave you debt free. And as the fairy tale goes, it means they'll live happily ever after. Over to you, Benji.
Danny and Moshe, thank you very much. Before everyone leaves, first of all, if anyone has questions, please do feel free. You can send them over to me via chat function, or if you feel comfortable, just unmute yourself and ask your question, and feel free to direct it either to Danny or to Moshe. While you're thinking of your questions, I just want to extend my immense gratitude both to Moshe and to Danny. Danny is now become a slave to Masilah webinars since the very beginning of the whole COVID crisis, delivering umpteen webinars for us, puts in so much time and effort to do so. So a huge thank you to you, Danny. Moshe, thank you very much. I know this isn't usually your normal mode of delivery and being involved with the community. So thank you for putting yourself out for us and for making such a difference to people. I do have a couple of things to add over here. First of all, someone has made me aware that there are a list of various gemachim. You can find them all in the following website. Well, I'll put it on the chat function in a second, and I'll read it out to you now. It's Kehillah NW, KEHILLANW.org /gemach, GEMACH, where you'll find a list of various communal gemachim that assist with the various aspects of making a wedding, whether it's the dresses or other aspects of making a wedding. There are wedding dress gemachim. I think we do have Svorhand over here. I think somewhere is here. She doesn't mind me mentioning her name. To be in touch with them as well. There are plenty of things you can do. I'll start though by asking a couple of questions that have come to me through the course of the chat. Someone expressed their not the concern, their incredulity almost about the idea of the girl's side paying for the wedding. But I think, Danny, you dispelled that misconception by saying that actually that's no longer the case, and it's something that should not be taken for granted on either side. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, as father of 7 daughters, I'm very happy to hear that, Benji. Thank you. And yes, my understanding, having spoken to other people and from my world experience, is that There are no rules, as I said. There's no standardization, and there shouldn't be any expectation if you're a father of sons that your future machatonim and the parents of your future daughters-in-law will be picking up the tab for the entire wedding.
Okay, understood. Moshe, that resonates?
Absolutely. It should be 50-50 all the way along. That's my
Okay,
opinion.
super. Danny, if you want to retroactively speak to Mukhtar, anyway. Let me ask you a couple of other questions over here. Someone said to me like this, and you know, just to make it clear to everyone who's joined us this evening, that Moshe is not being paid for this, and he's not paying us for this. He is cut here of his own free will, and very, very generously giving of his time, not self-promoting. But let's say, Moshe, if someone wants to try and do this by themselves, you know, have you produced yet the book of how to make a wedding? Is that something you've done yet? What would you say to someone who wants to do all of this without going to you or to Simchas Nisuin, wants to make a budget, or not even a budget wedding, they want to do it sensibly? How do they go about doing it?
Very simple. I always turn around and say to people, your wedding day is the most important day of your daughter's life. They do not have to take me to be their events planner. If they need my advice, they're happy to ask. If it goes overboard, I will turn around to them and say to them, excuse me, there is a fee. But if someone asks me a quick question or two, gladly willing to help at any good time.
And is there a list of how to go about making a wedding? Is there you know, for someone who's never made a wedding before?
I have a list of 120 questions, which when I go to a client's house, I go through those 120 questions. I do charge a little fee for that, because at the end of the day, even if they don't take me as a party planner for the day of the event, I would hold their hand all the way through till the actual day and beyond. So
I would probably add to that, Benji. The best thing to do is to speak to people. Speak to people. You know, the likelihood is that you have relatives, close friends, neighbors who have either made a wedding recently or know somebody who has. And the best way to find this information out is to ask people. And I'd add 2 points. Number one, no one has yet made the perfect wedding. With respect to my co-presenter, there's always going to be something that's been left out, even if it's finding where the little plastic cups are for the l'chaim. I'm sure Moshe's got a whole stock of them in his car, along with everything else. But don't worry about it. It's not worth fretting about the small things. And the second thing is this: what's key to your children's enjoyment of the chasna? Is it going to be the decorations around the chairs, or is it going to be having a lovely atmosphere, one where there's no stress, no anxiety, and people can be mindful, live in the moment and enjoy the chasna while you can? I would suggest that they forget about the small things and focus on the big things. It's much better route to happiness.
So following on exactly from that point, Moshe, something for you here. I'm not talking about over here, you know, the very, very, very big, you know, the weddings that are organized by perhaps the top 5%. In terms of just, you know, regular middle of the road weddings, what are the top 1 or 2 things that you've seen that people have spent on that you thought, and you could see almost objectively perhaps, didn't necessarily make a massive contribution to the atmosphere of the wedding that Danny was just talking about?
Decor mainly. I find people spend a lot on decor, which again, yes, some people think it's important, and it is important depending what venue you go to. But again, people have to look at their budget and then say to themselves, is chairs important? You know, is the mechitza such a big difference? You know, some people, yes, it is. Some people say the hall is disgusting. I need to have a focus point on the mechitza, on the backdrops. Again, it depends on what venue you go to.
Okay, so decor would probably be your number one thing that doesn't necessarily make a massive, you know, contribution to the overall atmosphere.
Or venue, for instance. I mean, I've got a wedding coming up very shortly, which is in a venue which is costing them £3,500, which looks terrible, very shabby and everything. But they're prepared to spend another couple of £1,000 to make that hall really nice and beautiful. You know, table arrangements, chairs. Again, so if they don't have to go to an £8,000 hall and spend another £8,000, they can go to a £4,000 hall and then spend £4,000 doing it up. And that would be a very big saving on the
Okay.
cost.
Okay, great.
I guess I probably would just add my tuppence worth there, Benji. Having made a COVID wedding, not a wedding that had COVID, but a wedding during the COVID period, Baruch Hashem.
I hope not in the complete lockdown one.
Not in the lockdown one,
Never,
when it was
never.
allowed. I have come to the realization that if you can make a wedding in a garden, or you can make a wedding in your shul, or in your back, in your living room for your nearest and dearest, that can be the nicest wedding you've ever been to. So don't get fixated on having a wedding in a hall. If the budget doesn't extend to it, it'll be what you make of it, and I guarantee you, it'll be the nicest wedding you've ever had and the most memorable.
Beautiful. A very practical question over here, Moshe, that you mentioned that they start from 27.50 ahead. First two questions. First of all, does that include a reception, or that's without a reception?
That's without the reception, dinner alone.
Dinner alone. Okay, and what kind of meal are we talking about? About a 3-course meal?
It's a standard normal 4-course meal, which is starter, soup, main course, dessert.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't see any other questions yet.
Receptions, again, there are gemachim which do reception, and there are caterers who do reception. And again, sky's the limit of what caterers would charge, what they do, what they provide.
Okay, I can't see any other questions over here. Any other questions? This is your last chance. Feel free to unmute, or you can send it over to me. If not, I'd like to again thank Danny and Moshe. If anyone wants to be in touch with the recording, please do send an email to admin@masilik.org. If anyone wants to get further details of the programs that Masila run, be added to the WhatsApp group. I'm going to post the number now over here. That's the number to be added to the WhatsApp. The Masila WhatsApp groups, where we share information, videos, resources that you can use, not just about this, just money management in general. Oh, thank you. I'm just going to post it properly now. So for more information about that, be in touch with us, and just send the WhatsApp to that number, and we'll add you to the group. If you want information about other programs that we do, the one-to-one coaching, if indeed you feel that you would like some kind of one-to-one guidance for planning for the wedding, I don't mean in terms of the practical aspects that Moshe was talking about, more in terms of the financial planning towards making weddings as and when you hope to make them. Be in touch with us, and we can set you up with one of our financial coaches who will sit down with you and kind of work through a plan to be able to put away the kind of funds that you need to be able to start making weddings. So send us an email, admin@masilauk.org, and we'll gladly take it from there with you. Like I said, send a WhatsApp to that number to be added to the groups. Other than that, one last time, thank you to Danny and to Moshe, and we look forward to seeing you all next week for the 4th and final installment of this fascinating series, which is, I'm afraid to say, just for women only, which excludes even myself. And we'll have to have someone else who's doing the introductions next week. A fascinating discussion on cost versus experience when it comes to buying a shapel. So do feel free to join us then. Otherwise, thank you so very much. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Right.